our financial markets course. So still under Unit 3, the stock markets and the central bank, we want to look at the Central Bank of Ghana. So by this session, you should be able to explain the role of the Bank of Ghana in the banking industry of Ghana, as well as discuss the central bank's independence and discuss the supervisory role of the Bank of Ghana. So if we want to first look at the history of the Bank of Ghana. So the struggle for political independence carried with it the struggle for economic independence as well. So political leaders in the 1950s realized the need for us to have an indigenous bank that will serve as a bank for the government as well as serve as a bank for fostering economic growth under the prime ministership of Kwame Nkrumah. So we are saying that there was a need during the struggle of independence for political leaders to look for local banks to foster the development of the nation. So even though agitations for the establishment of the central bank started in 1949, committees to thoroughly implement the actualization of the bank was set up. So by early 1957, the necessary arrangements had been made and the legislative activity was backed, and there was a passing of the ordination by the then British Parliament. So subsequently in July 1957, the bank was officially commissioned and opened for business in August the same year by Prime Minister Kwame Nkrumah. So when the central bank commenced its operation, our main banking system was lean compared to today, but with the help of innovations and technology, we now know that there are lots of banks. So first, there were two expatriate commercial banks. That was the British Bank of West Africa, known as BBWA, now Standard Chartered Bank, and we also had the then Barclays Bank Limited, which was known as the Dominion Colonial and Overseas Bank, and the new Ghana Commercial Bank was added to serve as a bank for Ghana. So we want to run straight to the functions of the Bank of Ghana. So according to Section 3 of the Bank of Ghana's Act of 2002, that is Act 612, the primary objective of the central bank is to maintain stability in the general level of prices. The bank is also mandated to support the general economic policy of government, promote economic growth, and ensure the efficient and effective operation of the banking and credit system of Ghana without compromising on its independence. So we are saying that the main motive of the formation of the central bank or the Bank of Ghana was to ensure that it supports the economic policy of the government, promotes economic growth, and ensure the efficient and effective operations of the credit systems in Ghana. So it also promotes and regulates as well as provides payments and settlement issues, and then it also captures issues that deals with the redeeming of currency notes as well as the issue of currency. So we want to look at the administration of the central bank. So the central bank is made up of a board of directors, and under Section 8 of the Act 612, the Bank of Ghana is governed by the board of directors, which consists of the governor and two deputies, one representative from the Ministry of Finance, and 8 other members appointed by the president in consultation with the Council of State. So the members of the board, other than the governor and the two deputies, shall be eligible for a 3-term service period, which is renewable. These non-executive members shall be entitled to allowances, which shall be determined by the board of directors in consultation with the ministry or the Minister of Finance. So in order to qualify to be a board member, we are saying that you must be a citizen of Ghana and you must be solvent. And also, you should not have committed any crime that has made you being labeled as dishonest. So people who are not citizens of Ghana, people who are declared insolvent, people who have either committed any crime, who are unsound in mind, or have been professionally unjust cannot serve as members of the central bank. So the government or the governance of the central bank is key to determine the operations of the central bank. And we are saying that the functions of the governor includes he's responsible for the day-to-day operations of the bank in line with the policy directives of the board, and he's in charge of the execution of the policies of the board, and he also performs other functions directly to the board. The committees and other stakeholders on the board also ensure the success of the board, and all the activities are guided by Act 612, which specify that an audit committee and a monetary policy committee should be formed to ensure the peaceful operations of the bank. So with the audit committee, they are to ensure that proper accounting procedures are followed. They monitor compliances or complaints with reports that the board makes to the general public. They also review the work of the board or the activities of the central bank. And the functions of the monetary policy includes they initiate proposal for the formation of policies that should govern the bank, and they provide statistical data and advice for necessary formation of monetary activities. And there are several approaches that the monetary and the banking system of Ghana follows. We will then want to look at the issue of central bank's independence. So there's a wide argument on the issue that should the central bank be independent? Should the central bank not be independent? So we have arguments for the central banks being independent. So some of the arguments raised for the independence of the central bank is one, to avoid politicization of the monetary policy. So to avoid people on the board from working in line with political ambitions rather than the ambitions of the country as a whole, people argue in favor of the fact that the central bank should be independent. And also looking at the fact that the central bank is the face of the whole country and has a reputable effect on the economy, people argue in favor that the central bank should be independent in nature. Also, to ensure sustainable long-term economic growth, people argue that the central bank should be independent. So with this, we are saying that when the board or the individuals on the panel are independent of political parties, the central bank or the central members now focus on things that will promote growth. So considering this point, people argue strongly that central banks should be independent, and also to ensure that the monetary policies work. People advocate for central banks independence. You realize that different political parties have different political ambitions, and they're able to manipulate the activities that the central bank is supposed to perform, since the government or the president has a key role to, especially in the appointment of some of these directors and management of these things. So people advocate that the central banks should be independent enough so that the monetary policies can be effective. So these are arguments for the independence of the central banks. So let's look at some of the arguments against the central bank's independence. So the first is to reduce accountability effect. So we are saying that if the central banks are not independent, all these strong audits, strong reviews would be reduced. So it will allow the central banks to be a bit flexible in their activities and as well as their accountability issues, and also to reduce policy rigidities. So we are saying that here there are times that the central banks may be too rigid in the sense that maybe some political parties may want to undertake certain forms of projects, and that will lead to a drift or a shift in the focus of the central banks. So to allow for flexibility of policies in line with the activities of some political states or political parties, people argue against the independence of the central banks. And then also people argue against the independence of central banks to ensure coordination of economic policy. So here, people assume that political parties are supposed or are regarded to work strongly in line with the central bank. So once they work strongly in tune with the commercial banks, with the central banks, they are able to achieve their goals more faster. So with these points, people argue against the independence of the central bank. But from the points we've raised for and against the independence of the central bank, realize that the points for their independence are good to a point, and the points against their independence are also key things to look at. So there are a lot of issues surrounding the independence of the central banks as well as against the independence of the central bank. So all too soon, we have come to the end of this session, and we have looked or delved more into the Central Bank of Ghana, when it was formed, a little history about them, their operations, their governance structures, as well as the independence of the central bank, their points for and against, and whether these things should be critically looked at. Thank you for your attention, and see you in our next session. Bye.